Hello and welcome into the Fog.net podcast. My name is Michael Swain, the Kansas beat writer for 24/7 Sports. It's a Sunday. It's kind of fall, at least it's football season, which means we're back with our weekly podcast with Kevin Flaherty, who obviously does all sorts of great coverage for KC Sports Network on the Payhe podcast and the Verbal Commitment podcast. All sorts of great stuff for Kevin. So make sure you check out all of his great work with KC Sports Network. But Kevin, fired up for another football season. It's crazy that it's already here. It's a week earlier than usual, but football season is here, and I don't know about you, man, but I'm itching to stop talking about it and start actually being able to watch and then talk about the games.
Yeah, it's so funny. Coaches every single fall camp have that expression. Our guys are tired of hitting each other and they're ready to go hit somebody else. As writers, as reporters, we get tired of talking season, and we at some point during camp hit that wall where it's like, okay, we want to write about things actually going on the football field, and so for us, that's our version of hitting somebody else, and so it's nice to be there. It's game week, Swain.
It is game week officially. That's weird to say. And obviously,
Yep.
Kevin, there's a big storyline going on this week, which is KU's got a two-thirds of a new stadium. They're going to
Yes.
open up. Obviously, we've had the chance to go and watch a practice or two in there. If you've missed it, go on our YouTube channel. We've got a video from inside practice on the, what is it, the east side, and you can go look at the new west side and the north side and all that. Um, Man, it looks great, and we'll get another tour, I believe, this week where we can kind of walk around some of the concourses more, get out some more video, stuff like that, so folks can kind of get an inside look. If you're not able to make it to the season opener, or if you live far away and you can't make it to a game, hopefully you can get a chance to kind of see what it looks like and picture what it'd be like to go to a game. But Kevin, getting to watch the construction unfold, getting to watch a practice inside the stadium, what was kind of some of your first reactions to getting to see all that?
It felt like, man, it's actually here because
Mm,
I think we saw so much of the construction process just based on when we would go up to Lawrence, right? You would be up for press conferences and then up for the spring, and so it just sort of slowly took shape, and you got to. I'm sure if you go back through your camera roll, same with me, you'll see it when there was nothing there, and then to see what it was this past week, with not just the stadium being completed, but now like the little pavilion slash parking area or whatever over by the football complex being open. It's actually open and here and getting to go into the stadium. I know you've had a chance to tour it, so have I not when it was all totally finished.
mm-mm.
But getting to see the little bits of the inside that we've seen so far, and then getting to be in there actually for a practice, I think one of the things that jumps out is just this is not a thing that is a band-aid, right? Like this is a whole new thing. And so I'm very interested and excited to see what fans think once they get in and experience it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is new, as Travis Goff pointed out to me on Twitter that day. Yeah, it is new. And I think, it reminds me, you look at the stadium, and I was talking actually to Joe Deneen about it a little bit. Um, Kind of compared to like when you go to Oklahoma, for example, the upper deck there, it is steep and it feels like it's on top of you.
Yeah.
And you get kind of that feeling of at least, with the north and the west sides. So I'm really excited for fans to get to see it. And obviously, there are going to be some growing pains, I think, of trying to break in a whole lot of new systems and a lot of that stuff. But I think that in terms of the game day experience, Lance has talked a lot about the sight lines and things like that.
Yep.
I think it's going to be such an improvement for fans. And obviously, Travis Goff continues to talk about the next phase, and that is tearing down then the east side after this season. So that starting in December, and then they'll play in the stadium next fall. But that will probably be with some construction going on, which means limited capacity. And then, I think theoretically the hope is that 2027, the whole stadium is done and ready to rock. So it's going to be really interesting, Kevin, to get to see home games at KU again. The atmosphere, I think, is going to be great. Obviously, if you remember, I remember we talked about it in 2023, right? The amount of sellouts and the
Yeah.
impact that the fans can make on a game. And I think with some of the new stuff that's been changed, I think it's going to make it even more intense and even more of a really good home field advantage for KU. So Fresno State, interested to see what that atmosphere is like. And then really, I think getting into kind of that West Virginia, Cincinnati games, I think that's when we're really going to get to kind of feel some of that juice from the fans and really see what it's like post, new rebuild of those two sides.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what the volume level is like.
Mm,
Obviously, it's not going to be totally completed, but with how vertical it is, you would think it would almost be sort of a wall of sound. And even some of the players, I think Keenan Caldwell mentioned, when you're in there, the stadium feels a lot taller than it did before.
mm,
You don't have sort of the long horizontal scape, and so you feel more enclosed in there as a player. And so I'm interested to see. I always feel like the loudest the stadium gets is a turnover. I'm
mm.
interested to see what happens, that first time Jalen Todd picks off a pass against Fresno State or somebody rips a fumble loose, just sort of, hey, is this a noticeable thing already
Mm.
before the stadium's even complete?
We have our first prediction from Kevin. Jalen
Oh,
Todd interception against Fresno State. Um, yeah, I agree. Like it's just going to be really fun, and that's the great part about I think where things are at for KU right now. We're going to go into a lot of these predictions and stuff, and we're going to do it, but I don't know what's going to happen. Kevin, you don't know what's going to happen, so
no,
I
no,
think
I
that's
don't
what
even
makes
know what
it fun.
you said over unders real loosely. So I kind of prepared like not individuals, but like by position, like, hey, quarterbacks could do this or whatever. And so if you there, I think there's going to be some of that, but there's
Mhm.
definitely going to be some where you're going to put me on my toes and I'm going to say, gosh, I have no idea.
Yeah, and don't worry, I got plenty of context. I did my research. Um, okay, so real quick here, Kevin, let's go ahead and let's start with our overall season win total over under. The last I saw was 7.5. Man, Las Vegas is good at this because that's a tough number. So for you, Kevin, this season, what do you say? Over or under 7.5?
Yeah, that's that sweet spot, right? Where if somebody asks you how many games can you can win, 7 or 8, and it's right in that middle where you feel almost like, well, if I pick 7, like, am I sleeping on this team? If I pick 8, am I too high on this team? And so it is kind of that perfect spot. I've said I think that the rivalry games are so key to this
Mm,
over under because I think if KU gets swept by K State and Missouri, it's 7. If KU splits, it's 8. And I currently have KU splitting those games. I actually think they go into Columbia and win, Swain. And so
really?
I'm not as high on this year's Missouri team as maybe some people are. They still have a quarterback competition. I think it would have been really good for Missouri, quote unquote, talking season, as we talked
Mm,
about, if Bo Pribula had come in as an alleged 7-figure guy and just won the job outright. The fact that they're not there, the fact that I do think that that's a game that KU is going to be very up for, and so I think KU splits those rivalry games and goes 8-4. So I'll go with the over, but keep in mind, like, it's that half game over. It's not like way over. How about you?
yeah, real quick. So I was over at my wife's aunt and uncle, and her uncle went to Missouri, big Missouri football fan. And we were talking about the game last night. He's like, "What do you think's gonna happen?" I'm like, "I have no idea." Like,
Yeah,
genuinely, I think Missouri's defense is gonna be really good.
yeah,
I have no idea how good KU's defense is gonna be, and I really have no idea how good Missouri's offense is gonna be. And he was not very confident in the quarterback position at Missouri. So, well, I think that's gonna be a tough one for KU. I do think
sure.
KU K State this year. Is it the year? Oof, maybe.
It's weird, right? It like it feels like you shouldn't pick KU in that game, but it's got kind of there are a few weird things working in KU's favor. KU being very good off bye weeks,
Mm,
K State being very bad off of bye weeks under Kleiman. The fact that it's going to be at the new booth, like it's when you look at the two teams on the field, I think the last 2 years have been you would say maybe a little bit more in KU's favor, and it didn't happen. But if you look at some of the external stuff, it could cause you to say, well, maybe this year.
yeah, well, they've all been close, right? And they
Yeah.
have genuinely all been very much coin flip games. And so, yeah, maybe this is the year where a fumble, falls to KU, or there's a missed field goal instead of a made one, stuff like that. I think for
Yeah.
me, Kevin, I feel very similarly to you. I keep going back and forth on it. I think I'm gonna go over because I think 8-4 is where KU ends up.
Yeah.
But this could also very well get clipped if KU goes 6-6, and it's like, oh, what do you think was gonna happen? Um,
We all got clipped last year.
yeah, yeah, we did get clipped last year, but that's part of it. So yeah, I think I'm gonna say over. Like, I don't gamble, but if you made me like put money on it, I think the range of outcomes leans slightly towards probably a 7-5, I think. But I do think that for KU, we'll talk about Jalen later on, but I just think that some of the stuff you're hearing about Jalen, and I think if he plays to the level that we know he can, I think this team can go put up a lot of points, and I think have a successful season, and one that, maybe if you're talking 8-4, is that with the win at Missouri? If it's not, then you're talking about a really good conference season, and one that you're probably in the Big 12 hunt at least into November. So I think, man, it's such a hard year to predict for KU, but
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and say slightly over 8-4.
Same.
Okay, so and we'll get some team discussion, I think, wrapped throughout this um, with some of the questions. But so let's go kind of offense first, and we'll cover some big picture, just numbers, and then we'll go into the defense. So for offense, I went ahead and looked at some of the numbers for last year of like, okay, and this will all be regular season. This isn't going to be, oh, well, if KU makes a bowl game, they're going to go. It's all just the 12 game regular season. Um, and so starting off overall, we can go with KU's rushing attack. Um, I have the over under at 2,500 rushing yards. That comes out to about 208 per game. Last year, KU rushed for as a team 2,545. So just slightly over what you saw last year. So what do you think, Kevin? Is this rushing attack this year going to put up more rushing yards than what KU did last season?
I think so, and I think part of that is going to be I think they're going to be more efficient with their runs. I think when you look at bringing in Matt Lubick, one of the things that those of us who have been around kind of feel like it is, even though KU has not directly said, "Hey, this is the way that it's going to be."
Hmm.
Ubik is great at the option game and great at the quarterback run game, and so I think when you look at all of that, KU basically operated with one hand behind its back in the running game to start last year because I think they were worried about Jalen. And you look early in the season, there wasn't as much designed quarterback run game. Even when they started using more designed quarterback run game, it's not necessarily something Grimes is usually as comfortable with. It's not really in his wheelhouse. And so I think by bringing in somebody like Lubick who has that creativity in the way that you can utilize it, I think that's going to be good, not just for Jalen, but I think too, you're going to pull extra defenders away even when Jalen doesn't have the ball.
Hmm.
And so I do think they're going to be a little bit more efficient. I think that's going to make up for the fact that it's going to be really tough to replace a single guy's impact like Devin Neal.
Yeah, and I think so. I think that's a really good point. In the quarterback factoring into this, right?
Yep.
Are you saying it's going to be kind of early 2022 run game, right? Where Jalen is accounting for a good chunk of yards every game? Because if you're going to say, about 208 rushing yards a game, how do you get up to that number, right?
Yep.
Is that, you know, 80 from Daniel Hishaw, 70 from Lee Williams, and then, you're talking about Jalen Daniels making up the rest. I mean, that's 50, 55 yards a game. That's a lot for a quarterback.
Sure.
So I do slightly lean under here just because I
Okay.
also think that Jeff Grimes to some degree backed himself into a corner sometimes with
Yeah.
what he was trying to do offensively and how I think poor some of the schematic stuff KU tried to do in the passing game. So I think I'm gonna go under, not by a lot, but I do think it's gonna go under. And I did also post some of the stuff on the message board. And so let me pull it up here. So we had nice 120 people vote on it, and the slight majority was for under. 54%
Hmm.
said they'll
Nice.
rush under. So I just think it's interesting because you look back at last year. Obviously, Devin was just amazing. Jalen,
Yeah.
you're right, didn't really run the ball too much. And they didn't do a lot of the quarterback option game outside of some of the speed option stuff, right, that KU did. And Daniel Hishaw was banged up for most of the year. And so you can go back and forth on how you want to look at it. And it's also a question of this year, okay, is KU going to have leads in games? Are they going to be trying to bleed the clock? Is that going to lead to more rushing yards? So there's a whole lot of factors, I think, here, but generally, I do think, Kevin, you're right. Like the quarterback run game is going to be, I think, a bigger factor for KU this season than it was last year.
Yeah, and I think too when you look at it, one of the question marks is they were pretty pass heavy in Jim Zabrowski's one game that we were saying.
They were.
We don't have a huge sample size for Zabrowski, but I do think part of it, and when we get to the passing yards stuff, I'm sure we'll talk about it. But we expect them to take vertical shots and things like that, and so you do wonder a little bit. Okay, even if there is more creativity in the run game, are they flat out just going to run the ball as much? Maybe
Hmm.
they throw the ball a little more this year than they typically have. And so there are some question marks that make that a really interesting sort of over under, I think. But I do think they're going to be more efficient with it. And I think
Hmm.
assuming health, and that's a tough thing to assume when you have Daniel Hishaw in particular, but for anybody really, it's football. Guys get hurt. I think KU's got a top two running backs where you could see both of those guys kind of produce at a relatively.
Hmm.
It's not like they're both going to run for 1,000, I don't think, but at a relatively running back one type of level between the two of them, I
Hmm.
think.
Yeah, I think so. Um, and I'm big on Lee Sean, and again, we'll get to that a little later. All right, so now let's get to the passing yards one. And this one I think is going to be more of a slam dunk. So will KU throw for over 2,800 passing yards? That comes out to about 235 a game. Last year, KU threw for 2,500. So I'm saying KU is going to go for 300 more passing yards. Do you think it's going to be more than that 300 or less than that? And people on the message board, we have a 68.6% majority on the over.
Okay. Okay. And that's an interesting one too. And I love the number that you came up with because the reason why is when you look at what Jalen did in the last 7 games of last year, I think it was right at 235 yards a game. And when you look at him, I want to say as a junior in the 3 games that he played, he was right around 235 yards a game. So that's kind of right in that range. I think I'll just slightly go with over. I don't think it's going to be much over. But the funny thing is, they could be just under, and you could have Cole Ballard throw for 100, and that's basically what gets them over by like 30 yards as the backup quarterback. So what do you think on this one?
Yeah, I do think over. Like, I agree with what you said about passing the ball more. Um, I think that just generally, yeah, I think Zabrowski is going to be more of a guy that, yes, there's going to be quarterback run game. There's going to be stuff that KU does to shorten some games, right? You know, on the road at Texas Tech, on the road at Missouri, right? KU's going to try and shorten those games. Um, but you just look at it and I think they're going to try and throw the ball more. I think they're going to have some more dynamic ability at wide receiver, right? Someone like Cam Pickett can offer you some of, I think, the route running that Luke Grimm did, but also offering maybe a little more juice where maybe he makes a guy miss and takes it all the way. And
Yeah,
I also, you got to think too, I'm mentioning Luke Grimm and I'm remembering back to last year, right? All the reverses that KU ran with Grimm where they counted as rushing yards. So
yeah,
that's another thing that, factoring it all in of how do you get to that number for the rushing yards. But yeah, so I think it will be over. I didn't realize this, Kevin, but you are right. Like over the final 7 games last year, it was 235 yards a game. That wasn't what I was going for, but look at you. So yeah, I do think it'll be over. I'm gonna maybe 250, 250 per game
yeah.
is where I think it'll end up about there.
That's
A,
fair. What did Bean throw for in that bowl game?
a whole lot. Let
Yeah,
me
I mean it
pull
was like 80 bajillion yards, but I mean it's the reason I ask is I think Jalen could have some games where he's at say 125, 150, depending on what it is. and I think he could have some games where he throws for 350 or 400 this year. I really do.
450 for Bean on that
There
one.
you go. Yeah, and the play that stands out to me in that game is the 4th and 1 shot play that they call to, was it to LJ for the touchdown
I
against
think so.
UNLV?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't
and
remember.
so it's like it's 4th and 1. Typically, that's a bread and butter running play for a KU. I
Hmm.
mean, shoot, Andy Kotelnicki, it's a sugar huddle play. But I shouldn't have said that when you were drinking. But
Oh my
no,
God.
but Zabrowski was basically like, let's put it up, and
Hmm.
they throw for a long touchdown on 4th and 1 in a key moment in the game when your head is probably yelling at you, "Hey, let's get this first down and keep moving the ball." And he slung that thing down the field, and so this could be fun to watch. There's probably going to be some points where people are like, "Oh man, like they just got too cute in that situation," but there's probably also going to be some points where you're like, "Man, this team's not afraid to attack
Hmm.
down the field at pretty much any given moment or any situation."
Yeah, and for the love of God, like the middle of the field, let's
Yes.
bring the middle of the field back because this is one we've talked about previously, but I've written about on the website as well. It's like KU just straight up did not attack the middle of the field last year. And if you go back to 2023 or 2022, like KU predominantly threw to the middle of the field. And so
Yeah.
I think that's another way where can you be more efficient as a passing attack and more consistent instead of just being shot play screen pass like it felt like at times last year. I think that's going to go a long way in helping. I think KU move the ball more consistently because depending on how you feel about the offensive line, that's going to impact the run game too. Can they, create the
Yep.
same point? So, all this stuff comes together. And when it comes to offense now, Kevin, let's get to the overall points per game on offense. Now, granted, we're just going to say overall, like as a team for KU, not like just what does the offense score, because that's, you know, pick six, whatever, that counts. But overall, points per game for KU. I set this at 34.
Okay.
So, four numbers here. KU averaged 29.7 points per game in 2024. The year prior, they were at 34.8 in 2023, and then 35.6 in 2022. So what do
Yeah,
you
I see him being right around 35. I think I do think they're going to be a little bit over. I think when you look at one of the interesting parts of this question is the fact that Leipold does not play up tempo. Like he is very much a we're going to grind this thing out. Even with an explosive offense, there aren't a lot of possessions,
think?
and so it's really how efficient you are with it. And I think when you look at last year, there were points that were left on the board at certain points. Whether that was, hey, the play calling isn't real great here. You're gonna take a field goal, or whether it was a turnover or whatever else. I don't think Jalen is typically turnover prone. So I think when you look at him being 2 years ago being or 3 years ago being 18 touchdowns, I think, and 4 picks. Um, 2 years ago, he wasn't really turnover prone in his 3 starts. He was last year,
Hmm.
but he wasn't as much again in that 7 game period. I think there was, a fumble or two in there, but he only threw what, like 3 or 4 picks in the final 7 games, I want to say.
Yeah,
It,
the
it wasn't
Baylor
a
game is going to
huge
impact
number.
it a little bit, because
Yeah,
you're
and so if you think, hey, you're going to ratchet back on the turnovers a little bit, which I do think is probably going to happen. And then you look at the fact that I think they're going to be a little bit, again, more efficient with what they do in terms of getting 7 in red zone situations versus getting a field goal, things
Mhm.
like that. I do think that this is an offense that is probably going to have a little bit more quick strike capability as well. And so I think 35 is a nice number. And so I would go over on that. How about you?
Okay. I think I'm going to say just slightly under, and my
Yeah.
only concern is just the number of fist fight games they're going to get into.
Yeah.
Like, I look at the schedule. Fresno State's gonna be tough because Fresno State's gonna come in, right? They're gonna try and limit possessions. Is there gonna be rust? I don't know. But then you go to the end of the season, right? You play Utah. It's Kyle Whittingham in late November. Like, it's gonna be a fist fight. And I think Iowa State, that game, depending on some situations, we've seen it go both ways, right? We've seen them be high scoring games. We've also seen them be fist fight games. Think back to 2022. And then obviously
Missouri.
K-State, Missouri,
Yeah,
like those are two other rivalry games are going to be, I think, fist fight games. And so that just for me slants it slightly under. I think it's a
sure.
team that should consistently put up 30 points. Um, but again, if you're talking averaging out over the course of the season, getting over 34, then you're talking how many 40-point games are there. So I think slightly under. But again, it's one where I was shocked, Kevin. I forgot the number for KU was 29 last year.
Yeah.
In my memory, I thought it was in the low 30s, not 29. Um, so that was not great at all. Um,
For a team that led the Big 12 in yards per play and punted the fewest times of any team in the Big 12. And so, like, offensively, you did some things really, really good, but, finishing off drives,
mm,
with seven and some turnovers and other things like that. Yeah, there were reasons that they didn't score at as high of a level.
exactly.
One
So,
one
yeah.
interesting thing, real quick though, KU this past year didn't really run it up on Lindenwood. And as weird as this sounds, if KU has like a 60 some burger, a 70 burger on
On
Wagner,
Wagner.
is that going to offset just, a fist fight game or two?
I don't know. I mean, they scored 48 against Lindenwood.
Yeah, 48. But yeah,
Yeah.
if you're
You think a 60 burgers coming?
I don't know. I'm just saying, like that's an interesting X factor that we might not be considering or whatever when projecting that. Because if you put up 70 on Wagner, then it's like, well, it's Wagner on one hand, but it's also like, well, that's 22 points that you can then slot into games or
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I don't know if I'm seeing a six. I don't know.
no, I'm
I
I'm just saying. Like I think
I want to go
with the way
farther.
Leipold play, I think that they'll get up in that game, try to stay healthy. Get backups a lot of time, but at the same time, it is kind of one of those interesting, just sort of, hey, this could happen and this could impact things a little bit more than it did a year ago, type of deal.
Yeah, and so I went back and looked at Tennessee Tech because I think,
Yeah,
that's a some decent comparison. I have no idea how good Wagner's going to be. 56 against Tennessee
yeah.
Tech. So if you want to say 60 against Wagner, I mean, I definitely would not pick that, but uh, you know, if you want to
Well,
talk yourself into it, I think you can.
let's just say all of a sudden you put up 24 on Utah. It's a fist fight game.
Mhm.
You score 24. You may not get to 20 in that game, but let's just say you get to 24. If you put up 63 on Wagner, that's 5 points. Let's just say that all of a sudden you had
Mhm.
29 against Utah. Like it's it's one of those really weird things that feels like it shouldn't matter, but ultimately, like how they score against Wagner could determine how close they are to hitting this over under.
Oh, you're right. I think you're very much right. And again, like yards wise too, that those types of games do go a long
Yeah.
way in helping, set yourself up. So, all right, Kevin, let's do this. Let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we're gonna do the defense, and then we're gonna get some player ones, and we'll go rapid fire more with the player ones because, again, I did way too much research for this. So we'll be back after this quick break. All right, we are back, and let's switch over to the defensive side of the ball. Kevin, I did realize while we were during the commercial break, um, I didn't read off what the fans thought for KU points per game on offense, and
All right.
66% said under.
Okay.
So interesting. Now let's switch to defense. We can go in reverse order this time. Let's do points per game allowed first, and then we'll work our way through some of the yardages. So I set this number at 26
Okay.
because over the last 2 years, it's kind of crazy how consistent they've been, at least from what I saw. 26.5 and 26.0 are the last 2 years from what I was able to get. And for the poll for the fans, 60% said under. They think KU will allow under 26 points per game. Again, broadly, will the defense be better than it was last year or the year before that? I was surprised, Kevin, that 2023 was so close to 24, just because in my
Yeah.
head, I think of the 23 defense being better than the 24 defense. And yet
Yeah.
the total point numbers are pretty much similar.
Yeah, I think the under is a good way to go with it. Quite frankly, I'll be honest with you, we don't know what we don't know about the defense at this point. But at the same time, I'm going to go the reverse of what you said earlier about KU being in some fist fight games because I think that's going to be what keeps us under versus, hey, the defense is going to be amazing. I think that there's going to be some games where you're not having a lot of possessions, where the other team's not having a lot of possessions. It's
Hmm.
going to keep the score line down. And I think when you look at some of maybe the truly elite offenses, KU's not going to be facing as many of those. And so there are some teams where it's really tough to kind of figure out what they're going to look like or what they're going to be. But overall, I don't think KU's facing a whole lot of, say, 35 plus points per game offenses that are really going to do this. I do think it could take them a little while to settle down though and figure things out. But I also think that once they do have some guys on the back end. They're just guys who are young or
Hmm.
guys who don't have experience at KU.
Yeah, yeah, and I love what you said there, Kevin, about it taking some time to settle in, because I think having 3 games in a bye week
Yeah.
for at least the defense, I think is going to be a great thing because that would give them some time to look back at what happened over the first 3 weeks, who played well, what little schematic tweaks are working, what isn't working, and then you can kind of reset and get ready to go for Big 12 play. I agree on the under here, Kevin. I think that defensively, you've got the defensive line depth. I'm so scared to talk about the linebackers, Kevin, because I don't want to get snake bitten here. We're like, I think athletically they're better. I think generally they should be better than, JB Brown and Cornell or, past iterations. But just the linebacker position has also kind of just been cursed for a while. And
Yeah.
so I'm a little hesitant to go full bore and saying this unit's going to be awesome, but I do think that there are some positive signs there. With Bengali Kamara and the athleticism he brings. Trey Lathan came along really well during camp. You know, I think those two guys most likely will be your starters. Joseph Sipp Jr., a guy that I think can provide really, really good depth for KU. So I like what that room looks like. And if you put together a really good front seven, well, all of a sudden you got a better shot at stopping the run, which then makes
Yeah.
teams more one-dimensional, and then makes it a lot easier on your underclassmen who are in the secondary to just hold their own. And so I think you put some of this stuff together, and I can kind of see the vision where KU ends up being maybe, you know, 2, 3 points per game less just because of the way the defense is able to play. Obviously, you need guys to stay healthy. But I do like the signs of what could be there for KU defensively. But you're right, Kevin. Like, we don't know. You know, is KU going to come out? This is not going to happen. But is KU going to come out like in a full 3-3-5 and just change everything? Again, not happening. But we don't know. So that's what again makes I think the non-conference schedule for KU so interesting. Is just the fact that we get to watch a first-time defensive coordinator, um, who I've heard good things about. I know Leipold really, really likes DK McDonald and what he does. And so we'll see. But I do think, yeah, I'd go with under on the points per game defensively.
I'll be interested to see too, because one of the areas they've really struggled is with quarterbacks who can use their legs,
Mm.
both in the running game and as scramblers. And that is something they're going to face this year, whether it's Pribula early on against Missouri, probably at least getting a package in there, if not being the outright starter. We'll find out in that regard. Even you play like somebody like Cincinnati with Brennan Sorsby, who's a really good runner. And so do they have answers for maybe some of the things that they haven't had answers for here recently? I think will
Hmm.
be another little interesting layer to that.
Yeah, Utah, Arizona, mobile
Yeah.
quarterbacks. Lord knows who's going to start for Oklahoma State. Trying to think. West Virginia, don't know. Yeah,
If it's Haas Hedgeny,
yeah,
who it could be, especially by the time KU plays Oklahoma State,
yeah.
Hedgeny can really run, and so that could be an interesting,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, can you improve there and not have, yeah, just guys go crazy. Oh my gosh. That's bringing back memories. So, all right, now let's get to the run game part of it. So, I have KU at 1,800 rushing yards allowed. That's 150 per game.
Okay.
Last year, KU allowed 153 rushing yards per game. And you can give your pick. I'm going to go find some. I forgot to get this data point from someone on the message board. So you go ahead and what do you think?
Oh, that's a really good number because I think they're going to be really good up front, and so they'll have a chance to limit people running the ball. But again, a lot depends on who you're playing,
Mm,
and when you look at the fact Utah, I expect to be a really good running team. Fresno State's going to line up and try and run the ball on Kansas. Like they're going to try and shorten this thing up. When you look at where their offensive coordinator was at before this, that was kind of the power running game was a big thing that they did. Cincinnati's going to try and run the ball. UCF is going to spread things out and probably try and run the ball. And so you're going to have a lot of teams that maybe are even better running the ball than they are throwing it, which is the other part of it. I tend to think I might go a little bit under, even though, again, you do have K State and people like that, are possibly going to run the ball really well. But I'm not super confident in it just because I do think they're going to face a lot of run first teams this year.
yeah, and that's the context, right? That is hard to project.
Yeah.
How are these teams going to try and attack KU? Do they see a secondary that they can try and exploit, and that's where they try and hit? I was able to find it. It's from someone on the message board. James Naismith, 2010. They went through and listed out all of the rushing yards per game numbers that KU's allowed, and the improvement has been really stark. Like you look at 2021, 250 rushing yards per game allowed. That's awful. 209 in 2022. 161 in 2023, and then 153 last year. So it has been a steady improvement for KU over time. I This is a harder one, I think, for me to
Yeah.
pick defensively for KU. Um, I think I'm gonna say under slightly because I think the front seven will be better. KU's defensive tackles will be good. KU is going to have some physical options at defensive end, right? If KU is playing a team that is really just hammering the ball, well, you can throw Alex Bray at the strong side defensive end spot. You can move Justice Finkley to the weak side, and all of a sudden you got two really strong players. Obviously, Leroy Harris can play the weak side or the strong side. Nav, yeah, he'll bring some physicality and some pop there. So I think you can see some mixing and matching situationally to try and stop the run. Um, but yeah, I think it's just going to be very interesting to see how some of these teams try and attack KU and what their
Yeah.
identity is, right, going into the year and how that kind of manifests itself.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's the biggest part of this because I do think that from a personnel standpoint, yeah, KU will be better at stopping the run this year than it was a year ago. But I think the opponent context part is the thing that makes this so interesting and such a tough one to predict.
Exactly. So, all right, now let's go to the other side. Passing yards allowed. I have this at 2,900. Oh, real quick, and I gotta get the fans. Gotta
Yeah.
see what they said. Well, KU allow over or under 1,800 yards on the ground. Oh my gosh, Kevin. 56 people said over, 55 said under.
We said it was tough.
I love it. That's so funny.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's switch to the other one. So 2,900 passing yards allowed. That's 240 per game. Last year, KU allowed 239 passing yards per game. What do you think?
I think it's probably going to be over. I think that this is a secondary. I think that's going to take a little time to find its sea legs. I think DJ Graham is a nice number two corner at a lot of places, and I'm not trying to disparage him by saying that. I think that's traditionally what he's sort of been in his career. The question is, do you have a number one corner for this year? I think KU's got some corners to be really excited about that
Mhm.
are younger guys, but you're asking those guys to grow up and be a Mello or Kobe guy sort of overnight. And I think it's so easy to sleep on how much better KU's defense was by having both Kobe and Melo, where you didn't have a designated area of the field from a cornerback perspective where it's like, well, we can pick on this guy.
Mm.
And so I do tend to think the passing yards will be over. How about you?
I do too. And also what does not give me a whole lot of confidence is hearing Brandon Shelby, KU's defensive backs coach, and Lance Leipold both talk about um, like communication and busts on the back end. If you're projecting passing yard numbers, you don't love to hear that communication or, not letting there be lapses or busted coverages, stuff like that. Um, Having that be mentioned late in camp, I'm a little like, ooh, okay. Because also you got to remember, they're going against a really good quarterback in Jalen. They're going against a really good offense coordinator and offensive staff, right? But still, not something you love to hear. And Kevin, the fans did agree 67% are on the over for that
Yeah.
one. So it's tough. So let's do this, Kevin. Well, let's switch gears a little bit. Let's get to some individual stuff. We can go a little quicker here. Um, let's start with Jalen Daniels.
All right.
Completion percentage, 66%. So for his career, Jalen is a 61.3% completion percentage guy. He last year obviously did not have a great year. 57% last year. But then in 2022, he was completing about 66% of his passes. So what do you think? Over under 66%.
I think it's going to be a little under because I think they're going to take vertical shots.
Mm.
And I think that generally leads to a lower completion percentage. And so I think he was right at about 60% over the last 7 games of last year when he kind of quote unquote shook the rust off or whatever. I would expect it to be between those two, maybe like 64% or so. So I have him a little bit under. How about you?
Yeah, I think at this point in time, I will take the Jalen career percentage number is what he's going to be. I
Yeah.
know he's not necessarily thrown for that specific number, but I think yeah, low 60s. I think 66 would be and above would be just incredible. That's 2023, right? The way he started that season, he was at 74. Like that'd be incredible if he threw over 60 or completed over two-thirds of his passes. But yeah, I think slightly under, but again, middle of the field, just use it
With
use it to your
with them
advantage.
with them throwing the ball downfield like I expect them to quite a bit, if he's completing 66 plus percent of his passes, then he may be a first team All Big 12 guy. Like that's the type of year he would have at
Mm.
that point.
Yeah, you'd have to. Yeah, exactly. If you're like average depth of target is again like among the top in the FBS or the Power Four, like yeah,
Yeah.
and you're completing two-thirds of your throws, like that's going to lend itself to a big time year. The running back position, Kevin, I think is so fascinating. Obviously, health is going to be such an important part of it there. The question I have is Daniel Highshaw, is he going to
Yeah.
reach the 1,000 yard mark? Right? That's 83 yards a game. What do you think? It's a yes or no. You can say over 1,000, under 1,000. It's the same question. Is he going to reach
Yeah.
those?
I think he reaches it. The question here is health. Like it really is. And it's tough to say, hey, this guy who has never had 700 yards in a season is going to hold up to the type of carries that it takes to get to 1,000. Having said that, you and I saw him in the spring. We've seen him in the fall. This is a little bit different, Daniel Highshaw, in terms of the way that he's moving, and so I do think that he's going to have a really good year from a yards per carry perspective, et cetera. I think because Leashon is so good, and I'm sure we'll get to Leashon here in a minute. I think there's opportunities to give him some rest in there, and so I do think that 1,000 yards is in play here, and I'll say he hits 1,000, but maybe not by a whole heck of a lot. Like it might be like 1,025 yards or something like that. How about you?
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing, Kevin. Like there is like me looking at this very subjectively, and then there's
Yep.
me like looking at like, oh man, wouldn't it be such a cool story?
Oh, sure.
You know, like, and I think that is what is kind of giving me a little bit of a hold up, just slightly, is the health, right? Has not made it through a season without, having an injury that impacts him. Um, and maybe this is the year he puts it all together. He's in the best shape he's been in, right? He looks great physically. Um, but it's just a question of, again, like you said, the workload over the course of a season, can he hold up? Um, I think I might lean slightly under,
Yeah.
like 900s. I think that'd still be a great season, right? For
Yeah.
him to wrap up his college career, especially being, that would be a very highly productive season. He'd probably be about in the top 15 in the Big 12 in terms of rushers. 1,000 yards would get you into the top 10 from what I did on my old research. But yeah,
It's
it's
tough.
a tough one because you're asking someone that's not been consistently available. Is this the year they do it? But then again, the question is, you can also use Jalen Daniels as an example, Kevin. You know, hurt in 2021, hurt in 22, hurt in 23, and then last year he plays every game.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just happens, right? The luck goes your way, and so maybe this is the year for him that it goes his way. I hope so because I think it'd be a great story. I think Daniel's a great kid, great guy to talk to, and really easy to root for. Just considering, not many people come back from dislocating the same hip twice.
Yeah.
You know, and that part of it I think is such a cool story. So, yeah, it's tough.
It,
But all right, now
it's great.
Le'Shawn. This one I think is going to be more of a litmus test of how good do you think Le'Shawn's going to be.
Yeah.
750 rushing yards is what I set that at. 62 per game. He had 821 yards at Iowa in 2023. Before you answer that, Kevin, I do have a really funny stat that shows you how depressing it is to play at Iowa as an offensive player. So, Le'Shawn Williams has three career rushing touchdowns with 300 carries. That's one rushing touchdown in 100 carries.
Oof.
Devin Neal for his career had one rushing touch or one touchdown in 15 every 15 carries. That's just depressing. I'm
The funny thing about it is, it's not like Le'Shawn is a scat back where he wouldn't be getting the ball around the goal line. Like he's,
no,
he's the type of dude that you would give the ball to in those situations. So yeah, that's no fun. Well,
yeah.
okay. So what was the number again?
So yeah, sorry, I got us sidetracked with the
Oh no,
depressing
that's good.
Iowa football fact. Um, 750 rushing yards, 62 per game.
I think I'd probably go under. I think he's going to be really good, but I think he's going to be sort of in that 650 to 700 range. So not under by much, but under. How about you?
I will go over. I
Nice.
think yeah, I think Le'Shawn had a really good camp.
Yeah,
Again,
he did.
with both of these guys, it's a health question, but
Yeah,
I think that I think he's gonna have a really good year. And Daniel's gonna start, and he's gonna be the guy. But I think it reminds me a little bit, to some degree, of 2022. So you remember early that season, right? Devin was the starter
yeah,
and had a solid start to the year. But Daniel was the one that you're like, man, he is playing at a high level right now. Like Devin is going to start, and Devin's going to, be the guy. But man, like Daniel's producing every time he touches it. Should he be getting more carries? I think we're going to have that type of conversation at some point this year about Le'Shawn and Highshaw. So, and that's a good spot to be in because that means you got two really good
yeah.
running backs. So,
Coming out of 22, NFL scouts, a couple that I talked to, were actually higher on Daniel Highshaw than they were on Devin Neal. And you and I talked about it. I thought Devin really took a jump into 2023. He was a lot more elusive, showed a lot more fluidity than he had before that. But coming out of 2022, to your point, there were some people who believed that Daniel Highshaw was arguably the better back. I think the other funny thing about this is it's kind of a double health question, right? Because what happens to Le'Shawn's numbers if Daniel Highshaw doesn't play a full season?
yeah,
And
true.
so if Daniel Highshaw, let's say Daniel Highshaw is mostly healthy, right? And he plays like 8 games. Well, obviously that's going to impact Le'Shawn's numbers on the upside as well.
Yeah, and my only thing there would be that if you look at, I think LeSean played every game in 23 and
Yeah.
22. So like last year he was hurt. Um, and so yeah, I think that's a good point though. Like, is he durable if Daniel misses time, and what does that do? Should we have a Johnny Thompson over under here? No, I'm joking. Okay, so
Oh,
wide receiver, we can do this one somewhat quickly. Basically, my
sure.
question is Emmanuel Henderson going to have the best season since Nate Sims in 2016? Or Steven Sims, not Nate Sims, different player.
What was
Uh,
this? Nate Sims had a great year at Ottawa
yeah, he
last
did have a
year.
good year at Ottawa. No, Steven Sims. So the number here I'm going to give you is 850. So it would be the best season at KU since Lance took over, right? LJ had 782 yards in 2023. That is the most productive wide receiver season KU's had. Um, Steven Sims obviously had 859 yards, I want to say, in 2016. Or did I write that down wrong? Regardless, that's my question. Did do you think Emmanuel Henderson is going to have the best individual season of any wide receiver under Leipold?
No, I think he's going to have a good year, but I don't even know that he leads this team in catches, Swain.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that that's more likely to be a guy we're going to talk about in a minute. But I think there's a chance that Henderson does a really nice approximation, basically of a plus version of Quentin Skinner, where he's going to hit some big plays down the field. He's going to have good yards, but I don't know that ultimately he's going to get the number of catches necessary to have 850 plus yards. I would be a lot more comfortable with him sort of in that 7 to 750 range,
Mm,
with him averaging like 18 yards a catch
yeah.
or something like that would be what I would aim at.
Yep. I totally agree with your assessment, Kevin. Um, he's gonna have some big time, blow the top off the defense plays.
Yeah.
Um, and I think he's someone too that again, talking about the middle of the field, like if you get him on dig routes over the middle, like he can catch it and put his foot in the ground and get upfield. But is the consistency going to be there where you look at someone, like Cam Pickett, who we'll get to, um, who has been KU's most consistent wide receiver throughout the course of training camp. So I agree. Again, it's as fun as it would be to say that yes, Emmanuel Henderson is going to go and have this huge year and do that. I think he's going to have a really good year. I think he's going
Yep.
to be a guy that could go and lead the Big 12 in yards per catch. You know, I would not be shocked if that's what happens. But I think that in terms of overall production, is he going to have the receptions to get 70 yards per game consistently? Um, yeah, so that's what I think. And then with Cam Pickett, I've got this one at 700 receiving yards, which comes out to about 58 per game. That put him into the top 20 in the Big 12.
I like it. I think that's one I'd probably go over on.
Mhm.
I think you're going to see Cam Pickett having a 50 plus catch season, and so that puts him kind of right around in that range. So I don't know that he's going to make a run at say 900 or 1,000 yards, but I do think that he's somebody that I would like over 700.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think that's something that, in terms of the consistency, right, he's going to get a lot of catches because he's the guy that can consistently get open.
Yep.
And again, with the athleticism that he has, like, can he make a guy miss? And I thought it was interesting. Maybe it was Terrence Samuel compared him to Luke Grimm, or maybe it was Leipold. No, it was Zabrowski. It was Zabrowski. And he said that, he reminds me a little bit of Luke Grimm and his ability to get open. Well, I think you'd say, granted, we're saying this after Luke Grimm just returned a punt last night for a bajillion yards, but I think Pickett might have just a little bit more juice than
Yeah.
Grimm did. And so maybe that helps you. Now, granted, I think those two are going to be KU's top two wide receivers. I think they're going to
Yep.
combine for a bunch. And then outside of that, it's a big question mark.
I do
Um,
think the tight ends, though, are going to be a little more productive this year than they were a year ago, which will probably factor in a little bit.
I think so. I'll throw this to you. Is Deshaun Hanna is he gonna do a Mason Fairchild in 2023? 450 receiving yards. That's what Mason Fairchild had in 2023. Does Hanukkah have that this fall?
I think it's in play. I think I would still go under, but I think it wouldn't shock me if you came to me at the end of the year and said, hey, this is where he's at. Remember
Mm,
last year, if you count Jared Casey as a tight end, because he was kind of that jack of all trades guy, they had 391 yards out of the tight end position last year. Everybody.
bad.
And granted, you had a drop or two in there. Trevor Cardell was banged up. You had some different reasons why that was that case. But I think if I'm looking at it, I think Hanukkah by himself has a chance to basically make a run at that 391 number that they had a year ago. I do think 450 is probably a bit much, but I also think they're going to get a little bit more production from tight ends 2, 3, 4 than they
Mhm.
got a year ago.
Yeah, I think
Remember,
Bowden
like,
Bruin.
Pierre didn't catch a pass last year.
Yeah,
I mean, as much as we think about him as okay, he was out there a bunch, whatever, and he had a couple opportunities or whatever, but they had two tight ends catch a pass last year. I would be stunned if they only had two tight ends catch a pass this year.
Yeah, for sure. Bowden Gruen gonna have the chance to produce Carson Brune. Uh, that's gonna be if they're both on the field at the same time. That's gonna be really hard for Brian Haney to get through. Yeah, I think it's gonna be tough for one guy, but I do think overall the tight ends should be much more productive.
Yep.
All right, let's go to defense. We can skip defensive tackles. I think we know that unit's gonna be consistent. All right, defensive ends. Dean Miller, over under 6.5 sacks. He had 6 sacks in 2024.
I'll go over just because I do think that there's usually a jump from a guy's first year as a starter into his second year,
Mm,
and so I don't know. I don't think he's going to have like a 10 sack season, but I do think that for a large portion of last year, Dean Miller was figuring things out basically.
mm.
And if you look at the end of the year, I think he had what like 4 sacks in the final 6 games, something like that, and so.
Yeah,
And so I do think that he came off on a pretty hot streak. The other thing that's going to make it interesting, though, Swain, is I feel a lot better about this defensive end group. And so I think that could impact what he does a little bit, and that you don't necessarily feel like on third down, Dean Miller has to be out there. You could have some other guys out there, and that could limit him a little bit. But I'll go over the number, but I would probably go under like 10. How about you?
Yeah. Well, I thought I had an answer, and then now I'm like second guessing myself. I'm gonna stick with that. I think under. I think under.
Okay.
Um, I have some concerns.
All right.
Yeah. I think the issue is he's going to be using in like pass rushing downs regardless.
Yeah,
I wish I would have put like total snaps because I would probably say I'd fade some of the total snaps for him.
sure.
Just because there's so many more players that can help and I think would offer maybe some different stuff and maybe a little bit more consistency first, second down. I'll still say under, but I wish I would have changed this to something different because that would have been a little bit easier to make the argument. Okay, let's go to
Another
uh,
factor, just real quick,
yeah.
is KU rushed the passer really well from non-defensive line spots
Mm,
last year. Look at Marvin Grant and JB Brown. I think Bengali Kamara has potential in that regard, but I'm wondering if there's going to be a few more sacks to be had because those guys aren't still rushing the passer. If KU is going to make those up somewhere else, maybe the defensive tackles get a few more with how good that group is.
yeah.
But there may also be an added opportunity or two in there where Dean Miller didn't quite get there because JB Brown got there.
True. Maybe. Maybe. That's a good way to put it. I'll be interested to see with someone like Bengali Kamara how they end up using him.
Yes.
So let's go to the other defensive end spot then and say Justice Finkley, Alex Bray, total production. Basically, is it going to be better than what Jeremy Robinson and Dylan Woodkey did last year? 50 tackles, 13 and a half tackles for loss for those two combined last year. Do you think they're going to be more productive on the strong side as the tandem there?
Ooh, that's a lot of tackles for
It's
loss
a
for that.
lot of tackles for loss. Dylan
Uh,
Woodkey was underrated, I think. And
it,
Jeremy honestly had a really a quietly very, very good season because he ended the year, you know, yeah, 5.5 sacks. Like, yeah, he had a good year. So, what do you think?
it's funny because I don't think they'll match the tackles for loss. I don't know that they match the sacks either, but it wouldn't surprise me if you looked at something like Pro Football Focus's run stops, it's like stops within like what 0, 1 or 2 yards of the line of scrimmage or
Mhm.
whatever it is. If they outproduced those guys in that category, because I do think they're going to be very good against the run.
Mm.
I just don't know if their stops against the run are going to actually be in the backfield or if it's going to be more, hey, we set the edge and somebody cleaned it up type of deal.
Yeah, I agree on tackles for loss like that. It's just a lot.
It
It's a
is.
lot. Um, and you're basically saying can they combine for 4 tackles a game? I think they will get the over on total tackles. I
Yep.
think they'll probably be under on the tackles for loss. Just my I think that's a really good point, Kevin. Like they'll be very good. I think the run defense aspect of it, they'll be better. Like Alex Bray is a strong side defensive end. Like I think can offer you a little bit more athleticism and twitch than Dylan Woodkey maybe did, who was more of a smooth power guy. Um, and then yeah, it's Finkley versus Robinson, and obviously Jeremy had a really good season. I think Finkley can have a good season, but he is also going to be a little bit limited just in terms of height and length. You know, going against the tackles in the Big 12. Obviously, he's played in the SEC, so he knows what the physicality's like. But just it's going to make it for a very interesting dynamic there. Um, let's go all the way now to the end before we have to wrap up. Defensive backs. This is fun. You go from a Kobe Mello tandem at corner. Um, you have OJ Burrows at safety. Those guys got a lot of interceptions. You go last year, 10 of last year's 12 interceptions were from defensive backs. And so KU also ranked number 9 in the Big 12 in interceptions total. So I've set this year's number at 10 and a half. What do you think? More interceptions from defensive backs than KU had last year.
I think it's under. It wouldn't surprise me if KU hit 12 interceptions again, but I think they'd be more spread out. I don't think you're going to have nine, I think, from Kobe and Mello. And remember, Kobe had three in one game against Houston. So that, that was a factor in it as well. And so I tend to think defensive backs, it'll be under that, but it wouldn't surprise me to see them hit the team total of 12 or so again, where you have maybe, you know, a linebacker pick off a couple or whatever.
Yeah. Um, funny story. I guess Leroy Harris had an interception in practice where he
Nice.
got up and with his big old arms and paws, like grabbed it. So maybe someone on the defensive line gets an interception. I agree, Kevin. It's a hard one
Yep.
because I mean it's just a lot. Like you kind of forget sometimes of just how, and also like Melo had the great stretch, and Kobe ends up coming back late in the year with some big plays. Like it's just a lot. And I think you can like the talent of the room, but maybe it's one of those where those instincts, right? That split second of reading it, seeing it, being able to jump the route, maybe that's not quite there this fall. So yeah, I agree with you, Kevin. Um I think slightly under.
Yep.
Slightly under. Real quick though, let's do some special teams talk because I know that's something that people love.
Yeah.
What's your read on the unit for special teams this year? Because we've covered offense, defense. We haven't talked much special teams. So 2 minutes or less, give me your take.
I like Lath Marjan
Mm,
a lot. I like when we talk to him. I like his approach. I like how analytical he is about what he does, and just sort of, hey, when I miss a kick, I'm immediately looking at the tape, and it's always the same, the same things, and
mm,
so it field goal kickers. It's a lot. I know you play a lot of golf, like. It's a lot like a golf swing, right? Like it's when you just absolutely hook a ball, you understand a lot of times if you're playing a lot of golf why you hooked that
mhm,
specific ball. Oh, I pulled off too soon. I did this, and so I like Lath Marjan a lot. I'm not sure about the punt game as much. I'm not as confident there. I think returner wise, they've got some really interesting
mm,
guys. It would not surprise me at all to see Emmanuel Henderson take one or two back as a kick returner this year, and I think even we focus so much on the returners and the specialists, but you and I have talked about it before. Your overall roster depth is so important for your special teams
mm.
units, and I think having guys out there like having a guy like John Kamara chasing down guys on kickoffs is going to make that unit better. And so I think overall special teams I expect to be a little bit better than they have been.
Punt, it can't be worse. Like genuinely, it can't be worse.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting, Kevin, because it's like punting. It's like guy gets ball, guy kicks ball, he kicks ball far. He kicked ball far at last school. He should be able to kick the ball just as far at this school. Like, and it may not factor, but you look at Finn Lappin's numbers, right, at McNeese State,
Yeah.
and he's bombing it. So
Yeah.
you'd like to think that that should continue. Now, field goal kicking is different, right? We've seen Seth Keller come in with a really good resume at Texas State and just lost his confidence during the season and really struggled to recover. And we'll have to see what, with Lath and how he does. But man, what he was able to do last year at South Alabama, really impressive. So, and your point too on return units, having some guys that are pushing for time on the two deep, having them be
So,
able to help you out there, I think that's a big deal. So, any other final thoughts, Kevin?
Finn hit from 57 in practice.
Oh, you mean Lath?
Or Lath, yeah.
I was
Lath
gonna say.
hit from 57 in practice. So I'm not saying he'll hit from 57 during games, but he was I asked him like what was the furthest that he had hit from practice, and he said 57. And he said he didn't know if Leipold would allow him to kick at 58, but he is hit from 57. So I do think a consistent kicker would really go
Mm,
a long way because Kansas, quite frankly, has lost some games the last
mm,
few years because the kicking maybe hasn't been consistent, and so I think Lath has a chance to improve that part of it, and
mm.
just based on that part, plus a lot of the younger talent getting out there on special teams, I do think overall special teams will be better.
I think so. Well, Kevin, regardless, it's gonna be a really fascinating season. I'm very
Yes.
excited to get out and watch some football finally. No, enough of watching practice and all the other stuff. Like, get to watch some games, so it should be a lot of fun. And obviously, if you've not been listening to Kevin's podcast, make sure you go over to KC Sports Network, listen to the Payheed podcast. Kevin and Nick Springer do that, and then obviously Verbal Commitment, more high school related. Kevin and Ryan Wallace do an awesome job with that as well. Thanks as always for listening. For Kevin Flaherty, I'm Michael Swain. We'll talk to you all next Sunday after the first game of the season. We can't wait. Hope everyone has a great week.